The first bullet ripped through his shoulder, jerking him backward. A second punched into his chest, stealing his breath. He staggered, his back slamming against the cold brick wall. Then, another. And another. A relentless barrage of gunfire. His body convulsed with each impact, legs giving way beneath him. His vision blurred, swallowed by shadows. The pavement rushed up to meet him. Bang. Silence. Darkness closing in. This is a true-life story. Please support me by subscribing to my channel, like my video, and drop a comment below. The streets of Carter Street in New York City were quiet that night, save for the occasional hum of a passing car. It was past midnight, the kind of hour when the city belonged to shadows and whispers. Beneath the flickering streetlights, Malik Diallo, a 23-year-old immigrant from West Africa, stood outside his apartment building, enjoying the crisp night air. He had just returned from a long day of selling gloves and socks on 14th Street. Business had been slow, but he remained hopeful. He always did. Hope was what had brought him to America, after all, a land where he believed hard work could build a future. He had dreams of enrolling in college, dreams of sending money back home to his family, dreams that would never come true. At that very moment, 4 plainclothes officers from the Street Crime Unit, Detectives Sean Dugan, Mark Reynolds, Ethan Carter, and Lucas Boyd, were patrolling the neighborhood. Their unit had been aggressively cracking down on crime, and the pressure to produce results weighed heavily on them. Earlier that night, they had received a report of a dangerous serial rapist operating in the area. The suspect was described as a black male in dark clothing. When they spotted Malik standing in the dimly lit vestibule of his apartment building, their adrenaline surged. "There he is," Dugan muttered from the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel tighter. Reynolds, the most experienced of the group, studied the young man. "He fits the description." They had made up their minds. They were sure this was their man. The car screeched to a halt, and the 4 men jumped out, their badges concealed by their plain clothes. They approached Malik quickly, their footsteps heavy against the concrete. "Hey, police, show us your hands," Dugan barked. Malik froze. His heart pounded in his chest. He saw 4 white men rushing toward him, their hands hovering near their waists. Panic seized him. In his experience, nothing good ever came from men approaching him like that. Instinct took over. He turned and bolted toward the entrance of his building. "Stop!" Reynolds shouted. But Malik was already fumbling for the key in his pocket, desperate to get inside, desperate to get to safety. And that was when it happened. He reached into his pocket, and in the dim light, Reynolds saw the movement. "He's got a gun." The words shattered the air. Dugan fired first. The deafening crack of his gunshot was followed instantly by another and another. The first bullets ripped through Malik's chest, knocking him backward against the door. His body convulsed, his legs giving way beneath him. He crumpled to the ground. But they didn't stop. The gunfire echoed through the street, relentless, merciless. The officers emptied their magazines, the flashes from their barrels illuminating the scene like lightning. By the time the last shot was fired, 41 bullets had been discharged. 19 of them had found their mark. Blood pooled around Malik's still body, seeping into the cracks of the pavement. His hand lay open beside him, his wallet, brown leather worn at the edges, sprawled inches away. A silence fell over the street. The officers stood there, breathing heavily, the scent of gunpowder thick in the air. Then, as if awakening from a trance, Carter moved forward cautiously. He nudged the body with his boot. No response. Reynolds bent down and picked up the object Malik had pulled from his pocket. His stomach dropped. "A wallet," he whispered. The news spread like wildfire. By morning, the city was ablaze with anger. "He was unarmed," the headline screamed. "They shot him 41 times, protesters chanted. His mother, Fatou Diallo, arrived from Guinea days later, her face hollow with grief. She could barely speak as she stood before the cameras, clutching a photograph of her son. "They took my child," she whispered. The outrage was uncontainable. Demonstrations filled the streets, thousands of voices demanding justice. Activists, politicians, and community leaders stood together, condemning the reckless violence. "They saw a black man and assumed he was a criminal," one speaker declared at a rally. "They shot first. They asked questions later." Public pressure forced the city to act. The 4 officers were indicted on charges of second-degree murder and reckless endangerment. But as the case unfolded, hope for justice began to wither. The trial was moved to Albany, far from the community that mourned Malik. The defense painted the officers as men acting in fear for their lives. They argued that Malik's movements had been suspicious, that he had failed to comply, that the chaos of the moment led to what they called a tragic mistake. The jury, a mix of black and white members, deliberated for 3 days. Then the verdict came. Not guilty. The word struck like a blow. For Malik's family, for the protesters, for all those who had believed that justice would prevail, it was a betrayal. The streets erupted once more, this time in despair and fury. Over 1,200 people were arrested in protests, among them civil rights leaders and public figures. But no amount of outrage could undo what had been done. Years passed, but the wound never healed. The street crime unit was disbanded, but that did little to ease the pain. Malik's mother wrote a book about her son, about his dreams, about the cruel twist of fate that had stolen his future. She spoke at events, stood before crowds, her voice trembling but unbroken. "I lost my son," she said once in an interview. "But I fight so that no other mother has to feel this pain." Meanwhile, the officers moved on. Some left the force. One, despite the controversy, was later promoted. The city tried to forget. But the people did not. Every February 4th, candles were lit on Carter Street. His name was whispered in the wind. Malik Diallo, a young man who had only wanted a chance at life, gunned down in the land of his dreams. And somewhere in the quiet of the night, a mother still wept. Kindly support me by subscribing to my channel, like my video, and drop a comment. I will be sharing more true life stories, so stay tuned. Your support means a lot to me. Thank you.